6.2.
There you go, Chris. It's
Dave
yours.
Hammond, we're jumping to 6.7, just to give Chris an early start here because he's got to leave early.
Got it.
Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. This is Chris Strunk. Besides being a structural specialist with you guys, I've also, my last 10 years within the Corps, I've been chief of dam and levee design section and our infrastructure support section for the Tulsa district. So with that being said, this topic has come up over the last few years, and Dustin Tellings and I worked on putting together this presentation. This is the first time we've done it for an RT. This is for version 6, so I definitely would appreciate any comments you gentlemen have. I know there are a few of you who are into this class today who have some experience with dams as well, so please provide all that information that you would like to see, or if there's something that's missing that would make it better, please let me know. That being said, let's move forward. So this is kind of a running joke in the Corps. We are talking about dams. I'm going to say dam a lot. I am a dam engineer. So as one fish said to the other, I ran into a wall this morning. Damn. All right. So we got that out of the way. Thank you. We're going to focus on 4 main objectives. The first being the dam definition and statistics, followed by dam failure modes, dam inspections, and the dam emergency mitigation. As we go through this, what I like, if you don't have it already, if you could quickly grab a notepad, there's going to be some points that I'm going to ask you to fill in some blanks or answer some questions. If we were all in a group meeting together at a normal RT, I'd call out people, but without having to go through and seeing who's on and what, I'd prefer if you just each get a piece of paper out and we're able to take notes and ask or answer the questions as they come up on the screen. And I will pause at the end of each of these topics to ask questions if you have any. So please hold them till I get to one of the stopping points. One thing I want to say before you hit play, Mike, is this is a large topic to try and cover. You can't cover the full course of dam safety in an hour-long block. This is something the Corps teaches over like a 40-hour-long course. So the goal is not to get you to become an expert in dams design or inspection, but more of this is a primer course for the emergency inspection post-event. And we're going to primarily focus on floods. That's kind of especially if you look at what season we're in now, where we're entering the yearly flood season for the U.S. So keep that in mind as we move forward. And Mike, go ahead and hit play on the video.
There is no sound on this one.
No, these are security cameras, and this is live. This isn't slowed. This is actual time. So this is the Brumadinho Dam failure in Brazil last year. It's a little over a year ago, January 25th. This was a tailings mine in a storage. The sad thing is the same company who operates this dam had a failure 3 years prior, which in that dam failure 3 years before this one, so 2016, 19 people died, and they consider that the largest disaster in Brazil's modern history. This dam failure killed 270 people. To date, there's still 11 that are unaccounted for, and the investigation is still going on. If you look over to the right of the screen, you'll see a train moving, and you can see some construction workers and some equipment moving as the floodwaters and the impoundment has now breached and is engulfing the site. This happened shortly after noon. There were several hundred employees that were in a cafeteria that was engulfed by this. The speed at which this is moving is almost unfathomable to me. Having seen several videos of these, to me it looks like it's either been slowed or fast forwarded depending on when you look at it. Now I think it's going to show some aerial views now of the embankment post event. So when we present today's topic, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about this kind of failure. The goal is that if we're brought on site and we do an inspection or you guys are asked to look at one of these, that we can get there before this would become an issue and we could start mitigation measures. When we look at buildings, we typically look at, how are we helping the rescuers and how do we mitigate their dangers if possible so they can extricate victims. Here we're trying to prevent victims. Let's go ahead and move forward, Mike.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
That video reminds me of the Oso mudslide 5 years ago in Washington State. Not unlike what happened there, where we estimated the mud flowing at 60 to 70 miles an hour.
Very much so. Very much so. Thank you, Fred. Next slide, please. Oh, you're on it. Never mind. I'm looking at like 3 different screens. Sorry. What is a dam and what's a levee? Go ahead and do the animations, Mike. So the 2 primary criteria I want you to take from this is, I'm not going to read the full definition. You guys can read that. But what a dam is an impoundment of water, wastewater, or liquid-borne material for storage. A levee is used to control or divert the flow of water to reduce the risk of temporary flooding. So that's the primary difference between the 2. I guess the next question would be then, what's a dam failure? A dam failure is a catastrophic failure categorized by sudden, rapid, and uncontrolled release of said impoundment. That's what we're going to be focusing on with this presentation. Let's move forward, Mike.
Hey, Chris, I'll make a quick comment that there's, excuse me, the reference of dikes as well. Levees are something that's typically used for flood control, or flood protection, I should say, but dikes are something that's are used. They're pretty similar design. They're used interchangeably, really, but dikes are typically something that would be part of actually supporting a dam is one example that would hold water from areas that would normally be underwater. Like originally, without the dikes, they might be underwater. And so just another feature.
And dikes too are fall in that levee category where you'll have like training dikes, and you'll have other associated earthen embankments that are part of the impoundment system that help control and divert the flow of water as it moves through it, whether it's the dam that is creating the impoundment or the levees and dikes that are preventing that flowing water from entering either out of the stream bed or beyond a safe area, as Jeff mentioned. So we're going to move through some nomenclature, and of course, I work for the Army, so we love our acronyms. So does the dam community. So the National Inventory of Dams, NID, that's kind of the body at which USACE belongs to it, and it helps track numbers of dams, and we're going to get into some statistics a little bit later on. But this slide here, what I want you to look at are these 4 points. You know, the high hazard classification. We consider if there's a single loss of human life. A significant hazard is possible loss of human life or significant property or environmental destruction. If we go back to that, the Brumadinho failure, you know, you had both loss of life and large property damage. Right now, like I said, it's still under investigation, but that one's approaching $19 billion in property damage. The bottom two, you know, equals or exceeds 25 feet in height and exceeds 15 acre-feet in storage. That's some of a definition of a dam versus, you know, I guess like a pond or stock pond for like livestock. And then, you know, equals or exceeds 6 feet in height or exceeds 50 acre-feet in storage. And some people aren't familiar with an acre-foot of storage. You know, 1 acre-foot of surface area is equal to 1 area 1 foot deep. An acre-foot contains 325,000 gallons of water. 1,000 acre-feet is approximately 325 million gallons of water. So that's to try and get a scale of the volume metrics that we're talking about. Next slide, please, Mike. Okay, so what are the different types of dams? So I put these question marks up. I'd like you to take on your sheet of paper and quickly, what do you think the top one, what type of dam is that? What type's the next one down? What type's the third one? And the fourth one, I'll give you just a couple minutes. Okay, let's run through the animations, Mike. So the top one is a, Mike, you there?
Yeah.
It's an earthen dam.
It says
Oh,
gravity.
Gravity dam, sorry. Gravity. The next one down is a arch dam. The next one, buttress, and the last one is an embankment. There are multiple types outside of these. There's also, you'll hear cofferdams, diversion dams, steel, masonry detention, Amberson dams, which is a hollow type of dam, but the primary four that most people are going to be considering are going to be these 4 arc types, the gravity, the arch, the buttress, or the embankment. And go to the next slide, please, Mike. So when you look at the number of types, you can see by far that earthen dam, and go ahead and run through the animations, Mike. The earthen dams are largest, and if you look at the one that stands out to me is the unknown one is the next largest category. It's like, how do you know what's unknown? That one always kind of trips you up a little bit. But the ones we're going to primarily be focused with are going to be the earthen dams. And there's a reason for that. The majority of the other types are owned by either federal or large municipalities, and will have the infrastructure support to do the inspections, and will be taking care of them during an event or post-event on their own. It's really the private earthen dams that become an issue. Let's move to the next slide. You think you went to go? Yeah. So a dam's typical lifespan is 50 years. It's in the past, it's what it's been. The Corps tries to look at our structures now more about in a 100-year time frame, but when they become needing significant maintenance or inspection is really up to that 50-year mark. And you can see, as you know, in the 1970s, only about 2.4% of the dams in the U.S. had reached that 50-year lifespan, whereas now as we start rolling into closer to 2019, we're getting over 20% of our inventory that has reached that 50-year life expectancy. So there's a lot of dams out there, and now we're talking about a lot of them that are reaching their anticipated life, design life. Next slide, please. Like I said, when we're with ownership, it's a private dams that are of concern. It's, you know, there's 64%. That's a very large percentage of them. When you look at the federal only owning 4%, and that's primarily the Corps and the Bureau of Rec. You have some local dams at the 20%, and those are, the local dams are more of your water supply, the local and the state water supply, and a little bit of recreation. The federal or the flood control ones, large water supply. And then you get the public utility for like hydropower, and then if we roll back up to the top, the private, that's everything else. That's your industry. That's your, like I said, it's just basically everything else. Next slide, please. So what are the components of a dam? And this is where we start getting into some nomenclature that you may hear some different types of names that kind of mean the same thing as Jeff had mentioned with the dike versus a levee. A typical embankment for a dam, for an earthen dam, what's shown here is you're going to have your crest, the top of the dam, your abutment or your contact, your groin is going to be where that dam ties into the natural landscape to either side. You're going to have maybe some drainage systems that are the toe drain that's pointing to a structure that's inside the dam that's collecting water as it moves through and brings it to the outlet, which leads to the outlet itself, which is tied back to the principal spillway, the intake, the tower in this case, or like a morning glory kind of tower. And then to the right, you have the emergency spillway or an auxiliary spillway. When the Corps discusses dams, we always look at a dam facing downstream. So if I was standing on the crest of that dam, I would be looking downstream, the direction the water's flowing, and that's how I would give my directions. The left abutment would then be the one over by the emergency spillway. The right abutment would be the one where it says abutment, and that's how we use our nomenclature. What I would suggest you use is coordinate systems and use your GPS to tag any of these items, because this picture looks nice and small, and this could be a typical dam, but there are several dams in at least in the Corps' inventory and in the nation where the earth embankment can be miles long, and then it can be kind of difficult to keep track of where you are, especially if you have multiple spillways. So use those tools that we have, like the GPS, to help identify these features and label them so you can reference back to them. Next slide. If you look at a cross section through the dam, you've got the toe of the dam on the right. You've got the berm as you move upstream. Then you have an embankment. You have the crest again. And then you've got on the upstream face of the dam, the upstream face of the embankment, you're likely to have a riprap slope or protection. The freeboard is an important concept, and that's you know how high is the pool elevation before it overtops the dam, or maybe before it reaches a spillway, maybe like the auxiliary spillway. You know, how much more capacity do you have in feet before you reach those elevations? The structure at the bottom is a simplified intake structure with a inlet drain, a tower, a pipe conduit, seepage collar, and then your spilling basin and your outlet work. These are going to vary greatly depending on the type of dam. They're often not straight. Some of the conduits, if it is a conduit structure, can be a mile or more long themselves. So this is just a simplified version of that. Next slide, please. So when we start thinking about a levee's got a lot of the same components as a dam or a levee or a dike. The freeboard concept is the same. The difference is that you typically have a dry land side over to the right, and in this case, it's showing a flood depth, and how much impoundment do we have on the safe side of the levee. And here you see, instead of calling it the crest, they're calling it the crown. And we're looking at the direction the water's flowing as towards us. The levee toe is an important identifier on this one as well, as one of the components that we want to remember for levees. Next slide. So why don't you take your piece of paper? We're going to answer the first three questions. I'd like you to jot those down. And for the fourth question, there's actually going to be two slides are going to follow this with some A through G, and I would like you to identify those. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to answer the first three questions. Okay, now let's move to the next slide.
You need to get some rest, bud.
All right, so was that a question or someone just not on mute? Okay, guess it wasn't a question. All right, so if you'd answer A, B, and C. Next slide. All right, so now we've got D, E, F, and G. Okay, so who wants to tell me what A is?
The impounded water.
Very good. All right, someone else give me B.
Embankment.
Anyone else? More specific on the embankment.
Downstream embankment.
Yep. Yeah, so downstream slope or face. What about C?
Groin.
Yep, and I will tell you, C is one of the hardest ones to find depending on your terrain. It can be very difficult to find that transition sometimes. If the dam is well maintained, it's pretty straightforward and easy. But if it's not, and there's a lot of overgrowth, it can be difficult to actually locate. All right, someone give me D.
Intake tower.
Principal spillway.
And
All right, What was that?
Principal spillway?
It's
I
not a
said
spillway.
intake tower.
It's an
Inlet.
intake tower.
Oh,
It's the inlet. Yes. E.
Crest.
Correct. F.
Outlet.
All right. And G.
Spillway.
And in this case, since it's dry on the upstream face, this would be the auxiliary spillway. The primary outlet is a tower, the picture over to the left, and the secondary spillway on this one is an auxiliary uncontrolled spillway. You can't tell that from this because the bridge that goes over it, but there are no gates or anything. It's just an open weir. Okay, so the first three questions we had were, what was the largest percentage of dams by type?
earth.
Earthen.
Anybody remember how many? 75,000 plus. All right, the next one is, what's the major difference between a dam and a levee?
Dams hold back water versus controlling or diverting it or guiding it.
Well put. And who's the largest owner of dams?
Municipalities.
Say it again.
Municipalities.
No, private sector. Municipalities under that chart I had earlier fall under the local and the state, and they would be the second below private. Private's the largest. Municipalities and state would be the second largest owner. Okay, good job, guys. So next we're going to move into the failure modes. Next slide, please. All right, so when looking at a gravity earthen dam, I'm going to start at the top left and work my way down to the right. Trees and brush. If an earthen dam isn't well maintained and you allow a vegetation to grow uncontrolled through it, it starts to open seepage paths through the dam itself and can weaken it. So that's a concern. We've got our little furry critter there for animal activity. If they burrow into the dam, that can create seepage paths. One of the ones I was not aware of until I started looking at putting this together was there's actually been cases, and this was from Tom Niedenhofer when he worked for St. Louis District, was telling me that where they had a farmer who kept letting his cows out on a dam and they kept walking up and down it, creating a path that basically created a crack in the side of the dam that then they had to go in and repair. So yes, livestock can create issues as well. We'll keep going along the top. We have longitudinal cracking. That's cracking that runs parallel to the dam. We have low areas or low spots in the crest of the dam where if the pool were to come up, we would have less freeboard than other areas, so we could overtop the dam. The next cracking, it's really referring to transverse cracking perpendicular to the dam. And then keep circling around with the internal erosion along the conduit. So if a seepage path or water begins to flow along the outside of a conduit, it can carry materials and create a failure mode. At the outlet works, as we spill water, if the stilling basin or the outlet itself is not well maintained and water is able to infiltrate behind or underneath, we can start eroding the dam and working our way back up along the conduit. And that can be either for, as this case shows, a conduited outlet or a spillway, an open weir spillway, where if you start to erode or create scour holes at the outfall, it can start to erode and work its way up the dam to a failure mode that can be significant. The harder ones to notice to me is on this one is probably the seepage at groins and the boils. If the vegetation is not maintained and you've got 3-4 foot high grass or brush or trees, it's really difficult to see seepage at a groin. You really have to walk those areas and probe them to see if you have more surface moisture than you do anywhere else on the face. Boils we'll talk about specifically later. Slumps are one of the ones that are probably easier to identify, because you'll see if a dam's nice and smooth, or if the dam is nice and smooth and has a well manicured face, you'll see bulges or slides, or you'll see discolorations depending on the time of year and the vegetation. You can see slumps and slides fairly easy. Next slide. For concrete dams, these are the ones that are as you see the 5 below, are impact undermining, which is basically the impoundment finding a way to get underneath the dam. A fracture, if there's a crack in the face, the upstream face or the downstream face. Overturning, or if the dam were to physically rotate. Or sliding failure. Sliding's one that we often are concerned about based on how it's founded in what geologic material. I know in Oklahoma we had several dams that were founded in shale, and we're concerned with sliding. So for our gravity dams, that's one we look at. Next slide, please. So for dam failures, this is through 2013, from January 2005 to 2013. So there's probably more dam failures than most people are probably aware of, and it's really due to who owns them. And it's really difficult to track some of these. The Corps itself has not had a major dam failure. Most of the large entities, state or federal, have not, but you'll have smaller ones. Since this stops in 2013, this does not show the flooding and damage that was caused in 15, 16, and if that were here, you would see a large number of circles up the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers in the middle part of the country. But because most of the dams are private, it's really difficult to get a consensus of the number of failures that have been recently. Next slide, please. But what we do know, and the ASDO, that's the American Society of Dam Safety Officers, they're the largest, I believe the largest dam safety group within the US. So when we look at those dams that have failed and we want to categorize, well, what caused them to fail, when we look at this chart, we can see that the highest one is flooding by far. Seepage and internal erosion is next at just under 20, and then the rest of them get fewer and fewer as we move down. The ones what I would have you take from this chart is the significance of how many more dams fail from flooding, which is why we're presenting this topic more of a post-inspection of dams for a flood event versus maybe like a seismic event. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's a primary incident mechanism? Well, so we know that the driver is flooding. Well, when it floods, what causes it to fail? The overtopping here is the highest, and this again is one where when the ASDO gathers this data, I don't understand how they have the unknown for the next highest. And I guess it's, in this case, it is primarily due to that there's multiple drivers, and they were not able to identify a single contributing one. Who said that, by the way? Is that Scott?
That was Joseph Toops.
Joseph, okay. All right, so let's go to the next slide and we'll watch another video.
Like any infrastructure, dams need to be maintained. Maintenance activities should be performed routinely so that minor problems do not become major. In humid eastern climates, vegetation will grow spontaneously. Unchecked growth of trees.
You're hearing that, right?
Yes.
Like any infrastructure, dams need to be maintained. Maintenance activities should be performed routinely so that minor problems do not become major. In humid eastern climates, vegetation will grow spontaneously. Unchecked growth of trees, brush, and long grass is undesirable for the following reasons. Trees can become uprooted, damaging the crest or slope of the embankment. Heavy vegetation will make inspection difficult and provide a haven for burrowing animals. Trees and brush can block spillways, reducing the dam's ability to pass large flood flows. Erosion of embankment surfaces is undesirable. Rainfall runoff can create erosion gullies, particularly where the dam meets up with the abutment. Burrowing animals should be controlled. Animal burrows will shorten seepage paths, which increases the potential for piping and internal erosion of embankment material. Sloughing and small surface slides can develop at any time. Surface slides need to be immediately repaired before they increase in size and become a major stability problem. Debris can block the spillway inlet, leading to increased pool levels and possible embankment overtopping. Riprap should be carefully inspected and replaced as needed. Wave action can damage the slope protection, exposing underlying embankment soil to rapid erosion. Debris left to collect on the upstream slope can damage the slope protection and hide problems. Keeping a dam in good condition is important and will prevent problems which could lead to failure.
Okay, so those were the general issues with maintenance and upkeeping maintenance. Now we're going to get into the more specific types of failure. So this one is the overtopping progression. So as the impoundment rises and you reach your crest and you start to flow over the crest, you start to see in the middle slide, the middle picture in this slide, the early stages of erosion. As you start weakening and removing material as water continues to flow over, we start cutting away the dam and you start losing sections. So at some point, the vertical erosion begins and we start to decrease the height of the dam. So this next slide, this next video is going to show us that.
Dams are designed to store runoff resulting from heavy rain. When storage has reached a specific limit, spillways are designed to pass the excess floodwaters, initially through a primary spillway. Many dams are equipped with an emergency spillway to help pass large flood inflows which exceed the capacity of the primary spillway. In an extreme flood, flows can exceed the combined spillway capacity, spill over the top of the dam, and create a very dangerous situation. Overtopping flood flows can rapidly erode down into an earthen embankment dam, leading to an uncontrolled release of the stored waters and causing catastrophic flooding downstream.
Okay. So those first two that we talked about, the maintenance and the overtopping, those are ones that are fairly easy to recognize. If you were to sit out to a dam and look at it, you could see that the pool is rising and you're approaching the crest of a dam. assuming that you can get to the dam and you can see how much freeboard you have left. You can go out and you can walk a dam and you can inspect it for maintenance, and you can see if there's trees and shrubbery and if there's animals burrowing in it. You can see those things if it's just not been well maintained. This next one, seepage failure through an embankment, is a little more difficult. We can't see what's going on necessarily inside a dam. The only time we can see this is when we see the exit. So when you look at these two pictures, you know, you've got the cross section of your dam, you got your phreatic surface, but when you start to lose material inside and we start to get seepage pass through the dam, whether it's the top one and through it, or whether it's the bottom picture and it's under it, we have to look for evidence of where that water exits. And we're looking for specific things when that water exits, because water moves through a dam. It does it very slowly, and hopefully there's, you know, as this one shows, there's filter systems to catch it and to prevent material moving through it. And that's what we're concerned about, is if we're moving material through the dam, we're slowly eroding it away from the inside out and create a failure. So when you go to the next slide, please. If it has a conduit, it can also happen, generally three ways it can happen with a association of a conduit. The top picture shows what happens if you have water moving along the outside of the pipe and it starts to pick up material and carrying it with it. The middle one shows what happens if we were to release so much water that we pressurize the conduit and we have joints inside. This is like a concrete conduit. We have joints and we start to push water through those joints. It can carry material from there to the outside. Or the bottom one is if we've had a displacement and we've got a joint open up on the upstream face where water is now not just coming through the tower, but is also coming through either the embankment or the impoundment itself, getting into a joint and carrying material with it. Next slide.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Most
back to the
all dams.
conduit Issue, we had
Hold on
some
one second,
major
Fred.
floods in the Colorado River at Hoover Dam and the dam at Page, that did some significant damage to the outlet works. I'm told that the voids were as big as the house. Do you know, can you share what that might be with us?
Voids inside a dam from when it pipes inside?
The outlet works, yeah.
Yeah, so
There was internal, the velocities were so great that it damaged the internal lining of the outlet works and created some large voids inside there, as large as a
yeah,
house.
that's strangely, that's not uncommon. The pictures I used earlier with the A through G, that was Pine Creek. That dam is one that when I was chief of the dam and levee design section as part of our dam safety production center, we did the assessment on it. And when we were out drilling, we brought out and we were taking cores in the dam to see what condition the interior of it was. We found a large void. Basically, as we were drilling down, we dropped the shaft. I'm like, okay, that's not good. So then we bring out a pump truck and we start pumping in grout. We pumped in 6,000 cubic feet of grout. And that one, I know there are other dams where we've done this too, or sometimes you can solve that problem. If you can find where it's seeping, you can mitigate it. For Pine Creek, it was what we just showed in the slides before this, where you had material moving along the conduit and then into the conduit. And so in order to prevent that, we took a steel pipe and we sleeved the conduit itself to prevent that material from moving from the embankment into the concrete conduit and then out of the dam. And that's how we mitigated that structure. Does that answer your question, Fred?
Well, my question pertained to a different kind of damage. The other dam was Glen Canyon Dam, with Lake Powell behind it. But the velocities that were going through these major floodings were on the order of maybe 100 feet per second, and created some significant erosion inside. And it took just minor irregularities in the surface of these pipes to allow that to happen. So
Yes.
anyhow, those are two major dams and big major issues on those two.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Let's play the video, Mike.
Dams experience seepage to one degree or another. While the dam experiencing seepage may appear in sound condition, there may be damage occurring to the internal structure of the dam. If seepage flow rates appear to be increasing and the flow is not clear and is carrying material, internal erosion or piping is likely occurring. Piping is an erosion process that occurs inside the dam whenever the seepage flow starts eroding embankment materials out of and away from the dam. This starts at the downstream slope or toe and moves rapidly upstream to the impoundment. This process will tend to accelerate as the expanding larger opening or pipe allows for increased seepage flows. If left unattended, the seepage flow and progressive internal erosion will soon get out of control. When the internal pipe or void becomes large enough, the embankment structure above it will collapse. This will result in a failure of the dam's embankment and a potentially catastrophic release of the stored water, which may cause serious property damage and loss of life.
Okay, so one thing is you saw like in these last videos, as we start to pipe through and we start to see like an embankment failure, you can have an embankment slide. So you can either have an embankment slide on the downstream face, that's the top picture, due to that weak layer, and the dotted line, I think you can see this on your screen, the dotted line that comes through the dam, and then that's the phreatic surface. As that starts to saturate and we have that weakened layer, that basically that whole green section as a wedge can slide and have an embankment failure. We can do the same thing on the upstream face if we have a rapid drawdown. And that rapid drawdown can be either intentional or unintentional. We could, as part of our mitigation process, decide we need to lower the pool. And if we lower the pool too fast and that slope is unprotected, or has a weak layer in it, we can cause a slide failure on the upstream face. And this tends to happen if we have like if you have a rapid pool decrease or that rapid drawdown, whether it's from intentional release and it's not controlled well, or if it's from you have a partial dam failure where we've now got a larger outflow than inflow, and we reduce that unintentionally as more water is being released to the dam, whether it's through a breach or whether it's through, as I said, our intention of drawing down the pool to save the structure. Next slide, please.
One of the most serious dam safety concerns is the stability of the earthen embankment. Unsafe conditions could lead to a major slide that threatens the safety of the dam. A key factor to stability is the location of the phreatic line, or the fully saturated zone of the soils within the embankment. In safe dams, this level is well confined below the surface. Since soils that are fully saturated are not as strong, a higher phreatic line can reduce the ability of the embankment to resist sliding. This is often noted by seepage exiting on the downstream face of the dam. Weak or poorly compacted soils can increase both seepage and the phreatic level, as well as weaken the embankment, contributing to a sliding failure of the dam. Properly designed dams often include an internal drainage system, such as a sand chimney and blanket drain. They serve as a filter to keep seepage from moving any soil, as well as allowing seepage to be removed in a controlled fashion. This lowers the phreatic line and improves the stability of the embankment. For existing dams with a high phreatic line, two alternatives can improve the dam stability. One is to add a drain near the toe to both filter the seepage and lower the phreatic line through a controlled release of the seepage. The second is to add a berm for added resistance and improved stability of the embankment. This does not lower the phreatic line, but improves the dam stability by adding weight to prevent slides in the embankment.
Don't hit play yet, Mike. Hold up. So, that last slide showed, as a section through where we have the blanket drain, and it talked about having a toe drain system. You're going to see some water move through a dam. There are many different types of these kind of drainage systems. Some of them, the toe drains, some of them are open trenches, some of them are enclosed, some of them tie directly into the outlet works. If you see a drain, whether it's an open trench or whether you see secondary outlets into your outlet work, and the water that's moving through is clear, that's okay. They're trying to control and mitigate the water as it moves through, and the dam's behaving as it should. As this narrator said, it's when that becomes cloudy, murky, or you can see that it's got sediment that's born in the water, and it's moving material with it. That material has to come from somewhere, and it's coming out of the dam itself. That's when we start to get concerned.
Hey, Chris,
Yes, sir.
how common would those the chimney or blanket drains be?
Very common. For the most large dams, or large is probably a subjective term, but for most dams, they're gonna have a drainage system to control that.
Okay.
They get plugged up. They have issues with them, so sometimes they have to be repaired. So you could have a failure because one of those systems is no longer functioning properly. If it's a well-maintained dam, obviously we want to be talking about it, but that's something that if it was an industrial type dam that changed hands and they never maintained it, you could have an issue like we saw on at the very beginning slide.
Yeah, Chris,
Good question.
oftentimes that blanket drain you'll see that on the downstream toe. You'll see a narrow strip of riprap that protects that sand layer. That's one way to kind of identify that feature.
Good point,
Yeah,
Jeff.
hey, Chris, this is Scott too. So in New England, we've got 33 earthen dams, all high hazard, all over 50 years old. And I think you guys saw the slide where Chris showed, 25% of the dams now are approaching 50 years or more. Our number one concern, and probably for most of you, the time you'll interact with the dam, post earthquake or post event, the biggest concern we have is usually seepage. If it's going to overtop, you're going to see it, obviously, but seepage is the thing you can't see. And Chris mentioned before the difficulty sometimes in seeing seepage. But if you are sent to a dam and you have to look at it and you see anything that looks wet where it shouldn't look wet on the downstream side, that should be your number one indicator. But that's where we spend the vast majority of our effort. That's where most of our dam safety efforts are focused. And that's the thing that is probably most likely to be an issue that you guys bump into out in the field. Just throw that out there, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Scott. So speaking of things to look for, let's play this video.
This is a typical sand boil along the Bennington Levee.
So that short video, what it looks like is a little mud volcano. So if you're on a levee and you've got you now got water on the what's supposed to be the dry side, and you've got water that's trying to move through the levee, often not often, but sometimes you need to look for these type of failure modes, which is it's the outlet where that water is moving through or under the control structure. So it'll either look like this, a little mud volcano, and I'll show some pictures later on of some other sand boils and what to look for.
Yeah, sand boils are, I worked for Sturgeon right out of school back in 94, 95, and the second, not the first 93 river flood, but down in Chesterfield, the Monarch levee down there had a number of sand boils. You can take your entire hand and stick it in those sand boils all the way up to your shoulder. You won't feel anything solid. It's incredible.
But before we move on to the next segment, the dam inspections, does anyone have any questions over the failure modes? Okay, good. Next slide. So there's two types of inspections. Although I'm gonna generalize it into two types of inspections: periodic inspections or emergency inspections. The periodic inspection is what's performed by the agency or the owner on a predetermined schedule as part of their operation and maintenance of said structure. We're not dealing with those. We're only going to talk about the emergency inspections performed by individuals who are on site post-event. And like the Oaxaca Dam in Puerto Rico, there was a couple STS who were present, who were sent out to look at a dam because they were the people who were present who could do it. So this is where we may fall in as structure specialists. You're on site, they may not have any structures for us to look at, but you're an engineer and you may get called out to look at some of these other civil works structures, dams or levees, to help perform those type of evaluations. So that's what we're going to focus on. Next slide, please. So for the emergency inspections, you know, if it's a well-maintained, if it's a large industrial type dam, or if it's a federal dam, they're going to have procedures for when they go into a 24-hour watch based on the pool and how it's rising and what their inflows are expected to be. Other dam authorities, they may not have these same prescriptive inspection intervals for flooding. So in emergency operations, finding the control manuals for that, or even being able to identify maybe who owns the dam or levee, could be very difficult. And you have unusual events, whether it be an earthquake, mechanical failure, or even an attack. Those type of inspections are likely to be performed by the dam owner because it's something that's going to trigger them to look at it. We will fall in either the flood event or possibly the earthquake event looking at dams. Next slide. For earthquakes, the Corps put together this criteria on when and how we do inspections. And it's based on magnitude and distance from epicenter to the dam, which can be difficult if you're talking about a large dam that's several miles long. But in general, this is what we use, and this comes out of the ER reference down at the bottom. It's an engineering regulation that directs us on how we maintain and inspect our dam structures. So you can see if it's a 4.5 within 10 miles, we're going to go look at it, all the way up to if it's an 8 point or 7.0, 125 miles, or an 8.0, 200 miles. That's a large radius. There are going to be dams within, there are not many places in the US where we have active faults where you're going to have a radius that large that you're not going to have dams that are associated with it, whether it's a municipality one or a federal, and definitely private based on just the sheer numbers of dams that we have in the inventory nationwide. What I will say on earthquake inspections before we move on is you got to be very careful on how you're going to inspect these. I do these for our district, and if you don't go out by yourself and start, you can walk the dam, you can look at the structure, take pictures. Be careful if you're going to go inside the dam. You do not know what the hazards are unless you have an owner with you who's familiar with it. Do not go into the conduit if you've not been trained to do those type of inspections. You may not know how long that conduit is. You probably are not going to have proper lockout tagout procedures. Someone could think that because they had an earthquake, if there's a chance that they could lose a dam, they may decide to open up and make releases while you're in said conduit. In general, do not go in the conduit unless you have the proper authority to go in with you and you've ensured that the mechanisms for making releases are locked out. Next slide, please. So some examples of distress, as Scott talked about, water on the downstream side. A spring starts on the downstream side of the dam. Definitely a sign of distress. A whirlpool develops in the lake with no gate openings. If you're not familiar with the structure, you may not know what's typical. If you've got the big Tainer gates, the big steel gates, and they're operating at a high head, they'll have whirlpools behind them. Sometimes you can get a whirlpool with a morning glory opening, which is basically, just think of it as like a vertical pipe out in the middle of the dam. And once the water gets above the pipe, it starts flowing into it. So you could have a drain-like effect there. The next one down, a guardrail has a kink in it. What that's alluding to is it's the symmetry of the dam. If you're looking along the crest of the dam, is there a deviation? You start to see a slide, a slough, a deformation where part of the dam is at the crest is starting to move. When you're driving out onto a dam or you're walking out onto a dam where the groins and the abutments meet, is there a noticeable depression? Does it dip down? A joint in the gallery starts to widen and leak. Y'all do not need to be in the galleries. No one who's not part of that dam structure should be looking inside the galleries unless they're accompanied, like I said before, with the proper authorities who operate the dam and have controls over the dam. New and active cracks develop in the dam, and that's where we're talking at the very beginning about the horizontal and longitudinal cracks along the crest. A gate vibrates loudly when it's open. The harmonics on gates varies based on flow, which is based on gate opening, and the head height. So gates may vibrate at certain resonances as they reach as you open it, and it may be normal, but it's something to be cognizant of. Rust stains in piers, that's more for long-term inspection. That's if you've got corrosion within a concrete dam and you're starting to see that. It's things to make note of, but the ones that we want to pay attention to are the ones at the top of this list. That spring or water where it shouldn't be on the downstream face of the dam. Next slide. This is a checklist that was developed by New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection and their dam safety standards. There's several checklists that are out there. This is the one that I actually like the best. I don't know if this will ever be put in front of the SSG as something that becomes part of one of our official forms. If we do develop one, I hope we develop one that looks very similar to this. It keeps in mind of some of our other forms, and it reminds you on the left column things to observe, and it identifies them based on key components of the dam. So we start with the crest, the upstream face, the downstream face, On the second page, you have your spillways, your channel, your outlet, and then your kind of lake type items. It's very simple. That's why I like it. It doesn't go too far one way or the other. If you were to fill this out and you were to forward this to someone who is more familiar with dams and their maintenance operations and inspections and evaluations, they could glean the information from this to help you determine whether you have a serious issue or not. I've included this as a handout. Jeff uploaded these to the Dropbox this morning. So it's something that I would add to your cache of forms until we get an official one. This will at least give you something to use in the meantime.
You
So
can
when we
also
do
put
our,
them on the website.
oh yes, sir. So we do our inspections. Can you? All right, when we do our inspections for dams or levees, this is the order that kind of follows that form. Your crest, your upstream. You need to remember you got to do the groins on both sides, up and down, upstream and downstream. Look at your spillway, and you may have multiple spillways. Look at your channel. If your channel starts to, your channel is looking at your outfall. If it starts to migrate away from the controlled structure, you've got something that's causing inflow from somewhere else. That needs to be a concern. While we're looking at the outlets, look at your tow drains if they're present. Your riprap, there's some items that you can look at that help you kind of identify things to be concerned about. And then lastly is your vegetation, your maintenance and control. So look and see how well it's been maintained. I want to show an example here. Some of you may be familiar with the Muscatatuck training area. It's a really cool site. They actually have their own reservoir that's just kind of northeast of the training site. And while we were out there last year, we sent a couple structure specialists to evaluate the dam that's shown where the red arrow is. I want y'all to take a second and kind of see if you can figure out what these pictures are on the next slide. Okay, has anybody got a guess what the top left is?
Crest.
That's your crest. What about your middle, top middle?
Inlet?
Sort of. It's the control mechanism for a valved outlet. This doesn't have a tower. This is a weird little dam. Top right. So the top right and the bottom right are both pictures of the auxiliary spillway. Scott, you think that's a good picture of a spillway?
Sure.
Yeah, that looks nice.
It looks nice, doesn't it? So on privately owned dams, depending on their age, degradation, this is what you're likely to find. As you're walking through this and you look at the top one, that grass is 3 feet tall on the upstream face. Downstream face is about the same. Trying to find the wet spots in something that's that thick is very difficult. It can be done, but it takes a lot of walking. It's not quick. You saw that dam is this dam's only a couple hundred yards long, 300 or 400 yards. It would take a good couple hours to walk that whole thing thoroughly, get back into that underbrush and into where the groins are and determine whether you have leakage paths there. Next slide. All right, before we move on to mitigation, does anybody have any questions or wants to add any comments for the inspection of dams?
Yeah, Chris, this is Brant. I guess I'm familiar with the core dams, and a lot of times we'll have piezometers that can be used to kind of monitor that phreatic surface through the cross section of the dam. How typical are those on privately owned dams?
I think it depends on the type of dam. Water supply, they're going to be somewhat typical. Piezometers, if you guys don't know what they are, it's basically going to look like a tube or a vent like you'd see like on top of your house, just sticking out of the downstream face of the dam. And it is, Brant said, you can use them to measure the height of the phreatic surface. The problem is if you don't know the history and the previous inspections of the dam, you don't know what that is. So even if you were to pull some elevations on one, if you were to even open one up and do something as simple as drop a plumb bob or something down it to try and measure the pool, or measure, not the pool, but measure the height of the phreatic surface from your elevation on the dam, it really won't tell you much. If you know the history of it and you've got the files, they're useful. But if you don't know anything about the dam, I would be suspect of putting too much time and inspecting or evaluating the piezometers.
Okay, and then just a couple more observations. I guess based on my experience, I was always taught when you inspect the downstream embankment of a dam, that could be like walked in a zigzag pattern, so that you can kind of identify if there's certain elevations, that you're seeing, wet ground or, signs of seepage through the dam. Is that you guys' standard practice?
So if you're doing it with a team, you can do patterns. Well, what I would do if I'm out there with another structure specialist, if there's like two of us or less, if it's just me, like when we did the Muscatatuck Dam, I just sent one guy out. If you have your GPS, you can track, you can turn your tracks on, and you can make sure that you walk the whole face, and you can use it to mark waypoints and mark any, so that way when you pull your data at the end, you could give it to a smart guy like Mr. Weber, and you could see if there's a line at which there's a commonality of like, hey, we've got, some seepage coming through at the same elevation across the dam. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then I guess my only other observation is based on my experience. It's important, I guess, when you do that inspection to mark areas that are showing any signs of seepage and kind of the extent of those, so that they can be monitored over time. And then often a tricky thing is to know the recent weather. If you had a heavy rain the day before, there may be areas that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be wet, but it just may be from, rainfall.
That's a good comment. That's a very good comment, Brant. He's right. If you've had recent weather where you've got runoff, you could have runoff from upstream that is pooling and running into the channel below the dam, and it's not associated with the dam itself. So very good comment, Brant. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, let's talk about mitigation. So when we look at mitigation, if we're concerned about the dam and the population below, lowering the pool is like you're going to be your go-to. But you're only going to do that if there's early signs of distress, and that's verifying that we've got issues. The next one is you could recommend for further evaluation. So if you're out on one of these and you're looking and you're not sure what it is, take pictures. take pictures, gather information, and do reach back. I know that's what happened at the Watahaka Dam in Puerto Rico. They reached through the STS chain, and I believe actually got a hold of Jeff. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, yeah. Pete contacted me.
So the IST gets a hold of Jeff, who then gets the right people who are, I believe it was Jacksonville District, to provide information on the dam. If it's seepage under a levee, through a levee, and it's sand boils, there are physical barriers that you can do that are fairly easy to build, and we'll show pictures of those and talk about them. If it's some of the larger areas, you could do things like the one video that showed you can add a berm, so you can add weight to the downstream face of the dam. In Watahaka, where they were having undercutting of the spillway, they added materials to slow the erosion. So they were placing large concrete, and I think they did sandbags too, to minimize the erosion until they could get it under control and then come in with a permanent fix. So when we want to talk about like finding sand boils, you know, we're walking those potential seepage areas. So we're looking at the toe, we're looking at the groins, those typical areas where water's moving through. We're looking for flowing water. We're looking to see if it's clear or if it's carrying sediment, if it's cloudy and has a tinge to it or a tint. Sometimes it's hard to tell based on the color of the water itself, and you'll see that in the next two pictures. Underwater sand boils are sometimes revealed by foam on the surface too. So let's move to the next slide. So you can see a foam on the top picture. The picture to the right, unless you get up close, and that's a blow up of it on the bottom left, you're not going to really be able to see it because the water is already cloudy, because you've got material that's moving into the stream itself. But when you see this circular pattern, you know you've got an issue. So how do we control those? Well, the control of sand boils is done by, you can construct a ring dike around a boil. That's what the first, this is a cross section through it, is showing those white squares. Next, please, Mike. You can put a barrel over the sand boil. The barrel has to have a hole in the top of it. I'll show you pictures of these real ones in a second. Or if it's in a ditch, or if it's in a path where water's then flowing from the sand boil to like a channel or something, you can block the outlet. So you can basically build a small dam to block that water path. And what we're doing with each of these is we are increasing the head pressure on top of that to put higher pressure on the boil, which will then cause it to drop the sediment, and it will no longer carry sediment through that seepage path. So the top one's a ring that ties back into the embankment. The bottom one is a complete ring, obviously. The top right is if we were to build like a small dam, so we create higher pressure on the left, which is the upstream, and then the bottom one is if you were to stick a barrel over a sand boil. And then it's hard to see in this, but just a couple inches down from the top of that barrel is where that pool elevation is inside the barrel. It's almost to the top. And I like how this photo shows that there is a they're taking a GPS coordinate of it, so we can track those.
Come a long way since the Garmin 5.
Don't be making fun of. All right. So in summary, what is a dam? Anybody?
Barrier to impound water.
All right. Hit the animation there, Mike. All right, good job. What is the most common cause of dam failure?
Overtopping.
Yeah.
Good. What type of dam inspection might you become involved with?
Emergency.
Emergency.
Very good. What is the most common emergency mitigation technique?
Lower the water level.
Lower the pool. Good job. Okay, with that, I'll open up for questions. And by the way, RUN is not an adequate emergency action plan. Not for dams.
Hey, Chris, this is Fred Nelson. I was with the IST at Harvey, and I had the assignment of evaluating Addicks and Barker levees, and on behalf of the IST. Did you have any involvement in those two levees?
Not those two levees, but I did do the Addicks and Barker Dam. I was one of the designers and the chief over that, but the levees themselves, no.